Well, welcome, folks. If you were watching yesterday, a lot of football, lots and lots of football, and it looks like when it's all over, the two adjoining states, Alabama and Georgia, are going to be playing in the next week's national championship.
That's right.
But did you see that Rose Bowl?
My word. I mean, it was a game for the records.
Unbelievable.
For the record books. It really was.
You know, I thought Oklahoma was going to stomp on Georgia, and I, with Baker Mayfield, one of the top players in the nation, he's the Heisman Trophy winner. I expected it was just incredible.
Double overtime.
Unbelievable,
You got your money's worth if you watched.
Yeah, usually the Rose Bowl, they've got a pretty parade and a lot of pageantry, but they don't have a football game that's that good. This was incredible. So anyhow, I'm footballed out, though. I mean, I don't know about the rest of you, but
there's more to come.
All right. Well, all right. But the song says, baby, it's cold out there. It's cold where you live. You're not alone. Brutal, freezing weather is hitting more than 200 million Americans across the country. And the president says, I could use a little of that global warming.
Well, there's no relief in sight at the moment. From the Midwest to the South and all the way across the East, forecasters are warning people to brace for still more frigid temperatures. George Thomas brings us the story.
3, 2, 1.
It's an event that draws hundreds of people at the beginning of the new year. 2018 was no different, despite the Arctic-like weather.
It was painful. My whole body is stinging. I feel like I'm going a little numb, but I'm happy that I did it.
Over 1,000 swimmers braved frigid temperatures to welcome the new year by leaping into the Atlantic Ocean for the annual Coney Island Polar Bear Plunge.
It was exhilarating, invigorating, and everything all above. I mean, it's a good way to start the year.
Temperature here, only 17 degrees.
But New York isn't the only place feeling the Arctic blast. Bone-chilling cold has gripped us here also in Virginia Beach, like it has much of the country, breaking century-old records. In fact, get this, on New Year's Day, the average temperature across nearly 2/3 of America was a frigid 11 degrees.
Some school districts in Massachusetts are even delaying opening school this week because of the extreme weather.
Most of our children walk to school, the majority of them walk to school, and a lot of them are not prepared for this type of weather.
In Oswego County, New York, whiteout conditions as residents brace for up to a foot of snow tonight. This on the top of the 3 feet of snow dumped on the area last week. Even some folks in the south are feeling the deep freeze. In Texarkana, Arkansas, some water fountains are frozen solid. In Cape Girardeau, Missouri, single-digit temps there saw ice chunks floating down the mighty Mississippi River. Firefighters battling this house fire in Lincoln, Nebraska in negative 10-degree temperatures, spraying water that quickly turned to ice. And there was this scene in the Dallas-Fort Worth area Sunday, a police officer slipping on the ice, then narrowly missing being hit by a sliding car. The extreme cold has killed at least 5 people. The National Weather Service has wind chill advisories and warnings stretching from the plains and Midwest into the south and east. Forecasters say brace for another blast of cold air later in the week, likely breaking more daily records and sending wind chills to dangerously cold levels. George Thomas, CBN News.
Well, that says it all, folks. I'm down here is supposed to be south. It's supposed to be warm. I think the wind chill is about, what was it?
I'm not sure what the wind chill is. It was 18 degrees when I left.
Yeah, but the wind chill is like 7 or 8.
I'm sure. You know, the thing is,
it's cold.
You think you can get to where you're going. You know, as a Wisconsinite, I thought to myself, I wasn't very smart this morning because I came with no hat on and no gloves. And I thought, if you have car trouble, you need to be prepared to be able to get out and withstand wherever you're at.
You lose 50% of your heat through your head. And so wearing a hat, you don't have to be macho not to wear a hat. I keep telling our guys, wear hats,
Yeah. Oh.
All right. Well, Obama did not back up the Iranian protesters. He just stayed quiet and let them, fizzle out. But But the people of Iran are keeping up their protests against their leaders, calling for an end of that dreadful Islamic regime. John Jessup has this.
That's right, Pat. The demonstrations have led to clashes between protesters and security forces. So far, at least 20 people have been killed in the protest. And as Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, both President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are encouraging the protesters.
In a rare show of defiance, some demonstrators shouted, "Death to Khamenei, Iran's supreme ruler." What began as economic protests have escalated into calls for Iran's religious leaders to step down. Many of the protesters are frustrated. Youth unemployment is at nearly 30%, and Iran is spending billions of dollars in foreign interventions in Iraq and Syria. But Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says anarchy won't be tolerated.
The government will definitely not tolerate those groups who are after the destruction of public properties or disrupting the public order or sparking riots in the society.
But President Trump tweeted encouragement to the Iranian people. He said Iran is failing at every level despite the terrible deal made with them by the Obama administration. The great Iranian people have been repressed for many years. They are hungry for food and for freedom. Along with human rights, the wealth of Iran is being looted. Time for change. Trump's support of the demonstrators and condemnation of Iran's leaders contrast sharply to President Obama's reaction in 2009. He remained silent when millions of Iranians took to the streets to protest a presidential election that many Iranians believe was rigged by the regime. Iran's President Rouhani claimed that Israel is behind the protest. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called that claim laughable and explained why he believes Iranians are pouring into the streets.
They seek the basic liberties that have been denied to them for decades. Iran's cruel regime wastes tens of billions of dollars spreading hate. This money could have built schools and hospitals. No wonder mothers and fathers are marching in the streets. The regime is terrified of them, of their own people.
He also blamed Europe for its silence.
Sadly, many European governments watch in silence as heroic young Iranians are beaten in the streets. That's just not right. And I, for one, will not stay silent. This regime tries desperately to sow hate between us, but they won't succeed. And when this regime finally falls, and one day it will, Iranians and Israelis will be great friends once again.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. South Korea may meet with North Korea as early as next week to discuss ways to cooperate with the South as it prepares to host the Winter Olympics next month. The offer from the South came a day after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un delivered his New Year's address, saying he's willing to send a delegation to the Olympics. He also repeated nuclear threats against the United States, adding that his country's nuclear forces are now a reality, not a threat, and that he keeps a nuclear button on his desk. If the North agrees to the talks, the South will focus first on Olympic cooperation, and then, Pat, they'll try to discuss ways to improve overall ties between the two countries.
It would be nice to see it. I don't think any of us wants to conflict in that area, but as one very engaging congressman from New York has said, it's like a crime family with a nation. And it is a crime family, and what's being done is terrible. But I think I've heard, among other things, as I was praying, I've heard from the Lord, and God is not going to permit a nuclear holocaust to take place in this world. He's not going to let the Iranians blow up the United States or launch nuclear weapons. And I think if King Kim Jong-un thinks that he has a button at his desk where he can launch a nuclear strike against America, he's sadly mistaken. And I think the Lord of glory will take him out. I don't think that he's going to be allowed to do that. The prospect of a nuclear holocaust is beyond belief. And the fact that he is playing with it and laughing about it and launching missiles and doing all the stuff he's doing, and the fact that he now claims to have intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching the United States is something that none of us can tolerate. But I don't think we're going to have to act. I think the Lord himself is going to act. At least that's my feeling, and I believe it's the case. We're not going to have a nuclear war started by Kim Jong-un. John?
Pat, President Trump is back here in Washington after his Christmas break, and he's got an ambitious agenda for the upcoming year. Fresh off his tax reform victory, the president is hoping for more legislative action in 2018. This weekend, he's hosting Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Speaker Paul Ryan at Camp David to plan out this year's legislative agenda on issues like infrastructure and immigration. GOP leaders are eager for more progress before lawmakers shift their attention to this year's midterm elections. Internationally, the Trump administration continues to focus on North Korea's nuclear aggressions, and the president also tweeted accusing Pakistan, another nuclear power, of spewing lies and deceit, giving safe harbor to terrorists while taking billions in American aid. And Pat, that tweet causing a war of words and protests in the streets of Karachi.
Well, they should be. The Pakistanis have not exactly been our friends. You know, I was over there, I met with the president of Pakistan, and they've been our allies for the longest kind of time. We give them $2 or $3 billion worth of military aid. And they have nuclear weapons, as we all know about. But the fact that the Secret Service of Pakistan is allied now with the Taliban and has given us trouble in Afghanistan is not a good thing. So the president needs to speak forcefully about it, and he is. Well, our CBN News chief political correspondent, David Brody, is with us now. David, it looks like the president has had a victory lap on the tax bill. What do you think is the top of his agenda for this coming year?
Well, as John touched on, Pat, definitely infrastructure. Also, welfare reform is going to be on the docket. And I know that sends shivers up the spines of quite a few progressives out there. But Paul Ryan and this House, at least, maybe not in the Senate, the House wants to see that get done. I know the president definitely wants to see that get done. And what does welfare reform mean? It basically means more work requirements if you're going to get welfare checks around the country, whether that be food stamps or otherwise. And so I think that's going to be something to look at. Infrastructure, though, top of the list. $200 billion most likely is the figure that Trump is going to at least put out there to begin with in terms of what he wants to spend. The White House calling that a floor, not a ceiling number. They expect that number to go up. But the truth of the matter is we're hearing here in Washington that they're looking at $1 trillion if you really want to get something done with the bridges and roads and airports and infrastructure in this country. So $200 billion ain't going to cut it. We'll see what happens.
David, that's supposed to be a Democrat program. They want to put people to work. But, you know, President Obama wasted almost $1 trillion on, he claimed shovel-ready project, but he couldn't find any. And so he used that money to pay off his political supporters. So what do you think about this one? The Democrats, will they ever come around to support anything Trump wants to do?
Yeah, I think actually this may be the one place where they get something done because, as you said, they want to do infrastructure reform. I think what they're saying is that $200 billion won't cut it. They want more money. What a shock. Democrats wanting more money. But Trump is going to kind of go slow at the beginning. We'll see how that plays out. But I will say this, that ultimately, you know, this is something that has been an issue in the past. It really hasn't been addressed at all. Trump taking on big issues. And I think this is going to be something that he most likely will be able to get done sometime in the first quarter of the year. We'll see. Well,
they talk about a government shutdown. You know, what do you see as the issues that are dividing them? Of course, Trump wants the wall. The Democrats say we'll give him maybe a little bit of the wall. What else do you think? I mean, DACA, will that be the thing that will cause a shutdown?
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, Pat. And that's what everybody up here in Washington is looking at, whether or not DACA will be doomsday when it comes to a federal government shutdown. And look, let's remember to basically pass this legislation, this big spending bill, you don't, it's not 50 votes here, you need 60. And so that's an advantage to the Democrats because Republicans, President Trump, the White House are going to need Democrat votes. That gives them some leverage. But on the other side, when it comes to immigration, the leverage that Donald Trump has is, hey, I'll shut the whole thing down. I'll shut DACA down in March, which he says he's going to do. And Democrats do not want that to happen. And so that's where the rubber meets the road, or what will exactly happen between the two sides. There is a sense right now on the Hill that there is some sort of legislative framework that they're working on right now that would give, in essence, some money to fund the border wall, a lot of money, but not the full wall, and border security as well, in exchange for this basically DACA being extended and not done away with.
Oh, you know, there was an article in at least an editorial in the Wall Street Journal today about the United Nations, and that they actually are going to cut their spending because of Trump and what he has said to them. Who would have thought that was possible?
Right. Well, who would have thought a lot of things were possible with President Trump and the way he does things? And speaking of what we don't know in 2018, what is he going to say on Twitter? I mean, he's good for at least one provocative tweet per week. And when I mean provocative, I'm talking about policy-wise. And so if you add up one a week, that's about 52 provocative tweets a year, which means we could go in dozens of different directions from what we're talking about right here on January 2nd.
Well, keep your finger on the pulse, and we'll be looking forward to what you find out, okay?
Sounds great. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you very much. Our reporter, David Brody, he does a tremendous job covering the White House and the federal government. We'll keep you up to date on it.